A conversation stalls mid-sentence today, and you cannot tell if it is hesitation or something being hidden. That uncertainty is not random. It is written into the sky above Leo right now in a way that touches your relationships, your career, and even a decision about money you might be putting off. There is a reason this particular Wednesday feels loaded, and by the end of this, you will understand exactly why the most important thing happening today is the one thing you cannot fully see yet: the bigger picture. Something is beginning today, but it is arriving wrapped in shadow. A new moon lands in Leo at 1:36 p.m. Eastern, and it happens to coincide with a total solar eclipse at 20 degrees Leo. From the Western, tropical perspective, this is a genuinely rare kind of reset. New moons open doors. Eclipses, however, are different. They do not illuminate. They obscure. Think of it like a green traffic light covered by a black bag. The signal to move forward is there, but you are not seeing the whole intersection. That is worth sitting with, because eclipses have a documented pattern of creating temporary blind spots, even about your own behavior. Astrologers have tracked this for centuries, alongside astronomers watching the same sky. The practical takeaway is not fear. It is patience. Major decisions made in the day or two around an eclipse often get revisited later, once the fuller picture appears. You may notice this in your own field too. Professional or vocational contacts around you could show unusual boldness right now, testing rules, status, or expectations that normally go unquestioned. Watching how far they push, and what actually happens when they do, tells you something real about how the game works in your industry. There is a second current running underneath all of this. Mars, the planet of drive and confrontation, has just moved into Cancer, and from a Western lens, this activates Leo's 12th house, a zone tied to rest, closure, and things working behind the scenes rather than in public view. This cycle runs for roughly 7 weeks, until late September. So you have an eclipse asking you to slow down and withhold judgment, and Mars asking you to do your processing privately rather than performing it for an audience. Two different signals pointing toward the same behavior. Meanwhile, in Vedic or sidereal tradition, today's moon is placed in Cancer, and that placement is being read as a communication challenge specifically for Leo. You may have plenty to say, and the thoughts themselves might be genuinely good, but something is getting lost in the delivery. That is not a coincidence sitting next to Mars retreating into private territory. One tradition says pull inward. The other says be more precise when you do speak. Put together, the message becomes clearer. This is not a day to broadcast everything you are feeling, but when you do choose to speak, choose your words with unusual care. Love. Here is where it gets personal. If Mars is quietly stirring something private in you right now, an old ache, a resentment you thought you would already dealt with, it is going to show up somewhere. And relationships are often where old feelings leak out first. You might have noticed a longer than usual pause before someone responds to a message, or a shift in tone that seems small but sits with you longer than it should. The instinct is to demand clarity immediately. Resist that. Later in the day, Mercury moving through your own sign forms an opposition to Pluto, which tends to make a partner, or someone with romantic interest in you, feel unusually intense, more demanding, more revealing, or just harder to ignore than usual. Here is the tension worth naming honestly. What you want is resolution. What today actually supports is restraint. If something feels emotionally loaded in a conversation, you do not need to force an ending to it in the next hour. Write down what you are feeling first. Take a walk. Sleep on it. Not every pressure point needs a same-day answer, and pushing for one under an eclipse, when clarity is already compromised, tends to backfire. For single Leos, there is a gentler note in the mix. A connection with a Gemini could catch your attention, and the energy there leans light rather than heavy, which might be exactly the contrast you need against everything else stirring beneath the surface. For those already partnered, this is a fair moment to be honest with yourself about your actual level of commitment, not performatively honest, but quietly, privately honest. In the same behind-the-scenes way, Mars is currently asking you to process everything else. Career. That same instinct to withhold judgment carries directly into your work life, and here it actually works in your favor. Current transits suggest your professional efforts are moving in a favorable direction right now. But there is a catch worth watching for. Remember those bold professional contacts from earlier? The eclipse window is exactly when people test authority, status, and unspoken rules to see what they can get away with. If you are on the receiving end of unusual confidence from a colleague or someone above you, do not rush to react or judge the situation immediately. You are watching a live experiment in how far someone will push before the room pushes back. What you learn from observing, rather than confronting, may prove more valuable long-term than winning an argument today. This is also where the Mercury-Pluto opposition matters again, just applied differently. If a demanding or intense exchange comes up at work rather than in your personal life, the same rule holds. You do not have to resolve it on the spot. A pause before responding protects you far more than a quick, sharp reply would. Money. That patience extends naturally into your finances, and this is genuinely good news. The energy today leans towards stability rather than stress. Your money situation appears to be moving in a positive direction, and that is worth acknowledging instead of glossing over. The one real caution here is unnecessary spending. With an eclipse creating temporary blind spots in judgment generally, this is not the ideal window for big, impulsive purchases, even ones that feel exciting in the moment. Let the eclipse pass, let the fuller picture settle in over the next day or two, and revisit any major financial decision once you are seeing clearly again. Small, considered choices are fine. Anything large can wait. Health. Here's the part that ties everything together, and it is worth slowing down for. What if the tension you are feeling today is not actually a warning sign, but preparation? An eclipse obscures. Mars retreats inward. The moon asks for clearer communication. On the surface, that reads like a day of confusion. But look again, and it is actually a day built for quiet processing, the exact opposite of confusion. You are not lost. You are just not meant to have all the answers yet, and that is a very different thing. Physically, this is a good moment to check in with your body rather than push through it. If you have been feeling more tired than usual, or noticing an old ache resurface, that fatigue deserves attention rather than a performance of pushing forward regardless. Something as simple as rest, journaling, or quietly stepping back from one obligation that keeps irritating the same sore spot can matter more right now than forcing productivity. It is also a sensible time for basic self-checks, including staying attentive to anything physically unusual you might normally brush off, like an unfamiliar lump, and having it looked at rather than assumed away. On the more subtle side, some Vedic practitioners may recommend Saturn-related remedies, such as particular gemstones or mantras, for individuals whose birth charts specifically support them during heavier periods like this one. That is never universal advice. Gemstone prescription in Vedic tradition depends entirely on an individual's chart, planetary dignity, and timing, so it is not something to adopt casually just because today feels intense. A simple mantra, a few quiet minutes of meditation, or time outdoors are safe, grounding options for almost anyone navigating this kind of internal pressure. Home and family. This same theme of privacy over performance shows up again at home. If you are feeling raw or unusually sensitive around family or close friends today, you are not obligated to explain why immediately. Creativity may actually serve you better than conversation right now. Many people moving through this particular Mars cycle report an unexpected creative renaissance, almost as if bottled-up feelings need an outlet other than direct confrontation. Art, music, or simply writing things down can process emotion just as effectively as talking it out, sometimes more so, since it does not require anyone else to understand it perfectly on the first try. If a family conversation does turn slightly tense, the same rule from earlier applies. You do not need to resolve every emotional undercurrent today. Eclipses are famously bad timing for big confrontations precisely because insight is temporarily clouded for everyone involved, not just you. Travel and spirit. If you are considering travel around this eclipse window, there is no strong reason to avoid it, but it is worth holding loosely to plans rather than expecting things to go exactly as scripted. Eclipses have a track record of scrambling the details, tickets, timing, information itself. This connects back to something worth remembering. An eclipse conceals, it does not reveal. That applies to travel logistics just as much as it applies to relationships or decisions. Spiritually, this is a genuinely rich moment for inward work, even though it may not feel dramatic in the moment. The combination of a new moon beginning and a Mars cycle asking for quiet processing creates real conditions for reflection. The kind that does not announce itself loudly but changes something underneath. If you keep a journal, this is a strong week to use it. If you do not, today might be worth starting one. Lucky signs. Given the eclipse's shadowed nature and Mars settling into Cancer's protective waters, deeper, muted colors like deep blue or soft charcoal feel appropriate today rather than Leo's usual gold and orange boldness. The most favorable window leans toward the quieter hours, early morning or late evening, when the day's noise has settled and reflection comes easier. Gemini carries a light, easy energy for Leo today, particularly in social or romantic contexts. And the day's underlying theme, if it had to be summed up in a phrase, is simply this: not everything needs to be seen clearly today to be moving in the right direction. Today's guidance. So here is where all of this actually lands. Today is not asking you to have clarity. It is asking you to trust that clarity is coming, just not yet. The eclipse hides what it hides for a reason, even if that reason is not obvious in the moment. Mars pulling inward, the moon asking for careful words, Mercury stirring intensity with Pluto later in the day. None of these are obstacles. They are all pointing toward the same quiet instruction: process before you respond, rest before you push, and let the people testing boundaries around you reveal themselves through their own choices rather than your intervention. That conversation that stalled earlier, the one that started all of this. It may not need forcing today. Give it a day or two, the same way you would give an eclipse a day or two before making any big call. What feels unresolved right now is not necessarily broken. It might just be waiting for the light to come back on.